I love Neovim, but I never use it. First off, look at this. Look at what is this? Look at this confusing landing. I see. I don't have a landing like this. You know, this feels it feels too much for me. You know, I'm a simple man. When it comes to Neovim, I'm a simple man. Okay, I have these nice little things right here. Gosh, gee, I use a little bit of you know, a harp. Oh gosh, okay, L fail right there. I use a little bit of harpoon, play a little bit around. You know, just the simple things with Neovim. I'm a simple man. I'm a simple man.
I love Vim. I think Vim is the GOAT text editor, but I actually have a confession to make. Now, if you've seen my videos on Vim before, you might think that I use Vim for everything.
I love this. I love this guy. I already love this guy. This guy is the best. He's the most honest, amazing developer ever.
But if I'm working on some big coding project, I actually never use Vim.
I hate this guy. I cannot believe this guy says these things, okay? This is just like, this is why you can't get advice on the internet, okay? Okay, you know, sure, I'm an 8 in charisma, but this must be like a 4, okay? This is ridiculous.
Now, don't get me wrong, I use Vim all the time to make some quick changes, like...
I love this guy. I love the fact that you're using Vim all the time. You know what? That's what I'm talking about.
If I want to go into my CSS and change something here, of course, I will use Vim. But if I'm starting a new project or sitting down for hours to work on something big, I'm always going to be using VS Codium.
Dude, I hate this guy. What are you doing using VS? What is it, little man? Talk to me. Why am I so big compared to you?
Of course, I'm using the free and open source software version of VS Code. I'm not using the proprietary version. But for big projects with tons of different files, I'm always using this for my coding. Now, I know I'm such a hypocrite, and I've even gotten comments saying, "No, I can't believe you're using VS Code.
You were the chosen one!"
But you might be wondering why I'm using VS Codium.
I do want to pause here for a second. I think this is, first off, there's a lot of things I really like what I'm seeing right now. First off, I noticed that he's not using React. Already a big fan, okay? I love what I'm hearing. This very well might just be HTMX going on right now. We don't even know. Very exciting. This could also be something else that I'm completely unaware of. I'm just going to pretend it's HTMX. Okay, second off, I think it's great that... he's exploring multiple monitors. You know, I always make this thing where I'm always like, I use Vim, you gotta use Vim. But I mean, the reality is that you gotta know what's out there. And the fact that he has a setup Neovim, he's exploring it, he uses it, I can see some nice highlighting. It means that he's taking his time and doing the right thing. Sure, he's using Nord, okay? Nobody uses Nord color scheme, loser! But at the end of the day, he's also out there exploring. And to me, that's like the biggest thing, right? To me, that's the biggest thing, is that you're out there trying to do exploration and understanding your system tools.
Because after all, you've probably seen some videos where people completely erase their Neovim to look exactly like VS Code. Yeah. And they get all of the features, all of the syntax highlighting, all of the autocomplete, and all of the cool features that VS Code has. I've even done videos in the past explaining how you can get some of the best VS Code features inside Neovim. And the thing is, if you install a million plugins and do a whole bunch of configuration, you can get a version of Neovim that is very similar to VS Code. I've even done it in the past. But even after doing that, after installing a whole bunch of plugins and configuring my Neovim, I still stick with VS Codium most of the time.
So I do want to take a pause here. If your goal is to make Vim be VS Code, use VS Code. Vim will never be a good VS Code. It is just not Vim's strength. It's never been Vim's strength. It's never been the purpose of having Vim. Vim, the purpose of it is to have a really low-level editor that you can customize the way you want it perfectly, exactly how you want it. If what you want is just literally VS Code, then just literally use VS Code. Like, why try to painfully make something into it? Like, the purpose is that you create a custom experience. Like, that's why I use what I use, is because everything I do is customized. It's customized into its most, like, thing that makes sense for me. Because I know for a lot of people, what doesn't make sense is that, here, let's jump over here. If I wanted to find everywhere that I'm using this, I use leader VRR, right? I press too many R's in there. I threw in a third one just for fun. And this shows me everywhere where I use this nice little thing right here. Look at all those. And then, of course, the definition. But, so it's like, for me, that makes sense. Right? For me, that doesn't make sense for you, but for me, it's Vim find references, right? If I wanted to rename something in here, let's rename, where are we at? Let's jump over here. Let's rename this thing. I go VRN for Vim rename. And for me, that just makes sense. It just rolls off the top of my head. If I wanted to see code actions, let's go like this, IO. So IO is a module. If I wanted to import, I go leader VCA. Vim code action. For me, it just does the thing for me. It just makes sense upstairs. It tells, hey LSP, tell me what you have, right? For me, it's all about that minimal interaction and a bunch of key maps that make sense. I tried to make it nothing like VS Code. I don't want it to be VS Code. I don't care about it being VS Code, right? I want it to be the way I want it. You know what I mean?
And in this video, I kind of want to explain why. So first things first, if you want Neovim to function in any way similar to VS Code, you are going to have to do a lot of setup.
Agreed.
Now, maybe you've seen these kind of pre-built Neovim distributions where you can install one package and it includes all of these plugins and things, all of these plugins and configurations out.
He's talking about like LunarVim, AstroVim, NVChat, if I'm not mistaken, which... First off, did I just get ragingly destroyed? You don't look 40, but your choice of text editor sure confirms it. Mistakes, you're gonna be in this YouTube video. You're gonna be in this YouTube video when I ban your ass. Kaboom! Oh, you look 40. Oh, well, get the hell out of the startup. Okay, maybe that was okay. Maybe that was a little okay. Sorry, that was a little mean, a little intense. I'm sorry. I shouldn't cope that hard. Come back in. Come back in. I think did I actually do it right? Did I actually get you unbanned? I can't even tell. Normally when you say unbanned, it says something. I actually think you just might be banned forever. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did I just dude? You're still banned here. Unbanned. There you go. Get the hell back in. Get the hell back in the startup. My bad. Okay, let's get back after this.
The box, so you don't need to do any setup. Now, I have tried these before. You might have heard of some of the popular ones like Astro NVim or NVim Chad. And these will do all of the setup work for you, so you don't have to install a million plugins.
But they install
whenever
you
use
plugins.
One of these pre-built Neovim distributions, it's not really the best experience because they're set up to somebody else's tastes. Like, they have all of the keyboard shortcuts that somebody else has made. And if you want to really customize it and configure it to be your own thing, it's going to also take a lot of work. And they can also be just as fragile as adding all of the plugins yourself.
And not only that, but at the end of the day, you have to learn how someone else sets something up. You have to modify your plugins in some non-standard documentation way. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Whereas, like, if you just take, okay, first off, it took me very little time to understand the Neovim way of doing Lua. Lua is just not hard. Right? I can build these dumb little plugins to do what I want them to do because they're not hard. Sure, I'm bad at parsing out and doing string parsing in Lua just because I don't get string parsing in Lua. But you don't really do that. You're doing config. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty dang awesome. Just check it out. And if you're gonna do one of these like these kind of pre-configured things, check out Kickstart. Kickstart is awesome. TJ helps do it. It's just a single file that gives you like the whole 9 yards of how to set up everything in LSP, how to do a plugin, how to have a package manager, and just walks you through it so that way you can do the right thing. You know, I really love it.
Speaking of plugins, I've been talking a lot about plugins, but let me just show you what I'm talking about when I'm talking about all these plugins. So these are all of the plugins that I have installed, and whenever you want it to look like VS Code, it's generally going to be a lot of different plugins in order to achieve this. These are all of the plugins I use, and this is just replicating a fraction of what VS Code can do. Now, the problem is, with all of these plugins, it's going to start to be a little bit fragile. So let me just update this, and every time I would update all of my plugins, it would be a little bit scary because I wouldn't know if it would break something. Sometimes a new update can introduce some new bugs, and I will have to go and fix some issues. And I can respect people who have these absolutely massive Neovim configurations, and they bring in even more plugins than me. But it started to get to the point where I was feeling like this is not what Vim was meant to be. Vim was always supposed to be this kind of lightweight text editor, and just bloating it up with 1,000,001 plugins kind of went against the spirit, at least in my opinion. Because like I said, it does become more buggy and fragile. Sometimes Neovim would even just crash on me for whatever reason, which didn't.
It happened to me too. What I found is that I've been really reducing my amount. I'm going to be doing another Neovim rewrite coming up here, a Neovim config rewrite, a refresh. I'm going to be dropping LSP 0. I'll probably be dropping Mason. I might keep Mason. I kind of like the idea of having something that just installs LSPs for me. I'll see if I can get it to work correctly with just having Mason, right? I don't need to know. I mean, I know how to install TS Server. If you just want to manage the actual installation of it, great. Like, I don't care, you know, right? But things like, obviously you need this, you need Harsheth. I never know how to say this guy's name. You need the little completion buffer. I want snippets. I want harpoon. I want telescope, tree sitter, and undo tree, and fugitive. I have everything I need. I think I'm going to be able to make my config pretty dang small, because the less plugins you have, just the less problems you have. You know what I mean? Mo plugins, mo problems.
Happened before I installed all of these plugins. And the more plugins you add, the more bloated and slow it becomes. I mean, it's still lightweight compared to something like VS Code, but after you add enough plugins to Neovim, it definitely becomes a lot slower than the original version with no plugins. And sometimes you can start up Neovim and just have it hang for a few seconds before it actually starts up. That ends up happening to me a lot after I add a whole bunch of these plugins. And at least in my opinion, it was just starting to feel like the wrong tool for the job. Not to mention, if you're doing anything for the web, any kind of web development, all of the tooling is built for VS Code first and Vim second. And
that's technically not true. At this point, all the tooling, most of the tooling is built for an LSP. LSPs are kind of transparent to the actual editor that it's using. And so I found most things you can have. The thing that doesn't work is Java. Java's just best done with IntelliJ. As far as I can tell, if you're going to do Java or JVM, go use IntelliJ. The rest, like, oh, you have Emmet? I can have Emmet. Oh, you have Prettier? I can have Prettier. Oh, you have lint warnings? I have lint warnings. Right? Like, there's nothing that says you or I can't have it. I won't show you my work project, but when I have an unused variable, it's marked as a failure because in the project I'm working on, the lint failure is that any unused variable is a failure level inside of ESLint, and it just works. Debugger is the one thing that does not work, but I'm also not 100% convinced I like using debuggers to begin with. I've always been kind of a printf guy working on hardware. Getting started in hardware has always kind of been that, like, it's always stuck with me that for the most part I know where everything is, and I just like to be able to fire it up really quickly. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I often don't try to solve things with a debugger. I usually try to solve them with a test. If I can't instantly recreate the problem and just make a test go straight to the function or the set of functions I think are a problem, then I don't feel like I've done a good job with my code, because I want to be able to rapidly iterate, right? If you're launching up a debugger to go figure out why you're doing something wrong in some small place, it makes it feel weird to me. Now, obviously, there's the whole HTML side of things. Is it better done in Chrome or is it better done in VS Code? I think Chrome's a pretty nice place to be, right? If you're doing a bunch of HTML stuff, it makes more sense inside of Chrome than it does inside of VS Code anyway. So that's kind of like my copium. Yeah, I'm heavy on the copium. I admit it. I'm full copium. But it makes me feel better. Like, that's why I structure my code in such a way that I never have to worry too hard. I always have, I always make sure that I pre-think about inputs coming into all my tools so I can run everything via the command line and standard in, right? So that way, if I feel like there's a problem, oh, there's a problem here, grab a session. This is what a session looks like, pipe it right in. So that way I have offline processing and I can iterate super, super fast. So for me, it's just, I've never really had a huge debugger need for most things I do. I don't know.
Even if Vim gets some of the tooling at all, because most web developers
usually usually when an error is like, hey, this line, here's an error, almost always that you can solve the bug just by looking at the line. Because at that point, if you have enough context on the program, it's just straightforward to go, oh, it's undefined, or oh, it's this instead of that, boom.
are using Visual Studio Code.
Present.
And so all of the extensions and things, like maybe a new framework comes out like Astro.
Someone's saying, if not LSP 0, then what? Just write your own LSP stuff. I've been really enjoying doing, here, JSPerf. Is it inside JSPerf? Do I have it inside JSPerf? Hold on. No, I don't have it inside of JSPerf. What is it? LSP debug tools? LSP debug tools. Like, right here, I have this as kind of like a little, you can just get going. But if I go into Lua LSP init, I can go in here and I have something that just goes and inits my LSP for me and does everything to the level I want it to, passing in command line arguments that I want to. This is built for my project, so I can restart. So while I'm building an LSP, this allows me to have like a quick utility to attach to every buffer and to restart my LSP whenever I want, because I'm developing more than one LSP at this point, that I really like having this tool. So I realize how simple it is. You don't really need LSP 0. LSP config will do more than enough, and all you have to do to make LSP effectively config works is that you do something that looks like, LSP config.tsserver.setup boom, and it sets it up. If you need to customize it, you customize it. You know what I mean? But you don't need all of that. LSP0, the problem with LSP0 is that you're learning a plugin that uses a plugin that uses a plugin that uses a system. So you're just like, there's so much to it that when you try to actually do the thing, you have to go through so many layers of abstraction that I find it difficult to actually do the thing. You know what I mean? Even though they've done a very good job with it. I'm not saying they haven't done a good job with it, and I am happy. I used it for 1 year. I'm almost up for 1 year now at this point using it. And I just find some things become really annoying when I need to edit something.
It's always going to be available for VS Code first because that's what these companies build their extensions for. And there are some things that just work better in VS Code, like TypeScript is one of them.
He forgot his other little double quotes right here. Do you see that? That's why his tree sitter's all goofed up. You looking at this? Or it's not tree sitter, sorry. VS Code doesn't use tree sitter. They use regexes. That's why this thing keeps on matching all the way through.
Most commonly cited examples of something that just works better in VS Code. So if you're working with TypeScript, then VS Code can do a lot more for you than Neovim. I'm talking about autocomplete and just a lot of features that make it a lot nicer to work with. It's unfortunate, but the tooling is still better in VS Code.
I don't know.
It gets to the point where Neovim starts to feel like a second-class editor because it is always getting the leftovers pretty much. And all of these official packages, like this was built by Astro, by the official Astro team, this extension for VS Code, and it was only ported to Neovim as an afterthought by some community members.
It's a language server though, so it's not an afterthought. The thing is that for you to have integration with a language client or with a language server into VS Code, you have to build a language client extension like this. It's not very many lines. In fact, I'm going to go look at this because I need to do this myself. But ultimately, at the end of the day, a language server it has no idea about the editor you're using, or at least it shouldn't.
And another thing is just that VS Code has all of these things out of the box. It has a whole bunch of nice, useful features. All of this syntax highlighting, all of these language servers out of the box. You don't have to configure everything. And for everything that you can do in VS Code, there is usually a way to do it in Neovim, but it generally requires a lot of configuration and setup in order to actually get it working. And it got to the point where I was just wondering, is it even worth it or not? Like, I understand that people want to perfectly configure their Neovim exactly how they want it to be, and Neovim really gives you that kind of customizability that VS Code doesn't. I understand the sentiment because that's why I use Linux over Windows. That's why I learned the Vim bindings. At first, when you use something like Linux, it takes a long time to set up and configure, but you kind of reap the rewards after that because you save a lot of time and headaches using Linux as opposed to something like Windows.
Yep.
But for me, I never got that feeling when I was using Neovim. So I would spend a long time configuring this and setting everything up to how I wanted it to be, but it was just never quite as good as how I had it in VS Code. And I understand that VS Code is a lot more bloated than Neovim. It's written in Electron, which a lot of people hate, and especially if you have an older laptop, I can definitely understand why a lot of people would be using Neovim over VS Code. It's just going to be faster most of the time. But at least for me, VS Code still runs fine on my computer. My computer is not that ancient. It's a few years old, but it can still run VS Code just fine. So for me, I never got that feeling where working with things in Neovim is so much better than VS Code, like some people report. And of course, if you don't mind doing some extra work, fixing things in Neovim and doing a whole bunch of manual configuration, then Neovim will probably still be better for you. But at least for me, whenever I open up my code editor, I want to just work. I don't want to have to fix some error that was just recently introduced with a plugin update. So over the years, I would just use VS Code more and more until I found myself not really using Neovim for much more than just some small tweaks and changes.
So one thing I do want to say is that Vim motions are the most important thing you can do, right? If you could learn Vim motions out of anything, use Vim motions, right? Like that's the thing, is that will be the thing that will give you the most bang for your buck. Learning to edit your code effectively, learning to type, learning to be one with your tool, like that's going to make more difference in your day-to-day life than almost anything else, right? That's why VS Code that's why it's not my first suggestion. When people say, what should I start with? I say, start with Vim motions. Vim motions. I don't care about your editor. Start with the motions. It's going to reap rewards ad infinitum, right? Like it just keeps on going. And so just start there. Start there. And then if you never want to move forward, don't ever move forward. If you want to, keep doing it, right? Keep going as much as you want. I don't care. That's just the way, some people, they're more curious in certain things and other people aren't and they don't care. That part doesn't matter. It's attempting to figure out what is most efficient and being willing to learn things you don't understand to begin with. I think is the thing that I like to see in devs, right? Because that's why I'm starting to do this kind of functional language looking at, is because I've never done a functional language, and people say it's so much better, but it feels extremely unintuitive. It's very backwards from how I'd approach things, but at the end of the day, if I want to know what is really, really great to use and can I be fast with it, I have to be willing to put myself through a level of discomfort to become better. I always relate it to golf, right? Golf, you have to hold the club in such a weird way, right? You like intertwine your fingers, you hold it in a certain way, you have to make sure things are pointing at you, you can't squeeze with your finger, right? Your forefinger should not be you shouldn't be squeezing with certain things. Like there's all these weird things you do that are completely unnatural. But at the end of the day, it makes you a better golfer, which is totally strange, right? It's totally different than what you're used to. So is something not being intuitive immediately bad? No. Can it be long-term reward reaping? Yes. So Vim motions, use them. It's that simple.
And I'm sure there's going to be somebody in the comment section saying that if I configured Neovim correctly, then I wouldn't be having these issues. But in my opinion, it just wasn't worth all of the effort.
Golf reference.
Now, that's not to say that I don't use the Vim key bindings. Of course, I use the Vim key bindings.
I've been playing golf for like a year. Okay, I play like, I can't play 18 holes. I don't have enough time. I take my kids and we go and play like 3 or 4 holes. That's it. And just because we don't ever have enough time to go do that, and we just go and play, hopefully about one night a week. And I just find it so much fun. The kids are finding it so much fun. We're just having like a competition who can get stuff in with the less amount of strokes. I give them candy. It's all great times, right? All the things that kids like, and it's a lot of fun.
VS Code. If you go down here, I have VS Code Neovim plugin. Of course, you should be using the VS Code Neovim extension and not the Vim emulation plugin that they also have, because that is just a buggy mess. This works so much better because it actually integrates Neovim inside your editor. So basically, this right here is a Neovim window right here, and I can just move around this like I would a normal Neovim window.
I like that.
But of course, I also get all of the features of VS Code on top of it. So of course, I would never betray my Vim roots by not using the actual key bindings. That would be ridiculous. But as for the actual editor, I still prefer to use VS Codium. Now, of course, you're welcome to use whatever you want. I just wanted to offer a different perspective from all of the Vim purists. Because some purists will say that you have to use Vim and Neovim for absolutely everything. And if you use something like this, then you're betraying the spirit of Vim. I don't believe any of that. And I think that you can use whatever you want as long as it makes you more productive. So I wanted to say that if you love Vim, but you don't necessarily love the experience of editing in Vim, then that's totally fine. Use whatever tools you want. Just please don't call me a soy dev in the comments, okay? That would make me really sad.
What a great bait at the end. Did you see that? Please don't call me a soy dev. Boom. He's going to get so many soy dev comments. And, oh, man, just gaming that YouTube algorithm. Look at him go. Just gaming. What a genius. You know how many times, you know how often and how easy it is to put like typos or to put stupid stuff or to say something incorrectly, and people will correct you inside the comments constantly. It is the easiest way to drive engagement. It's just you say Jason and people are like, right? Why? I don't know. Why do they? I don't know. Chat Jippity. People love that. People love it. Mwah! That was good. You know, I feel like I don't know any quote unquote Vim purists that force you to do something that are like, you can only use Vim and that's it. I don't know. I don't know anybody like that, but at the end of the day, I just want you to enjoy your editing experience. Enjoy it. Have a fun time, because guess what? You're going to be inside your editor for the next rest of your life. You might as well enjoy it a little bit more. You might as well make it the way you like it. So whatever gets you to that end goal, enjoy it, my friend. The name is I banned mistakes, and maybe I made a mistake, okay? Maybe I made a mistake.